The Panzer I was Germany's first mass-produced combat tank. This well-known but often underestimated tank was actually responsible for Germany's success in many operations, as without this tank, Germany would not have been able to learn and advance its Panzer program as far as it did. But how well did the Panzer I actually fare in combat? The first combat deployment was in the Spanish Civil War, where Germany sent a total of 96 Panzer I Ausf A's and 21 Panzer I Ausf B's, with also 4 Panzer Command tanks and 1 Panzerkampfwagen training tank to the nationalist forces. This was a great chance to test Germany's tanks and their tank tactics. But Germany's tankers had to train Spanish nationalists to use these tanks, as they were not to engage in combat themselves, even though it is known that they did. The Panzer I performed well in the infantry support role and was even used in a mass push against Republican defence lines during the Battle of Brunette, where an effective blitzkrieg-style strategy worked. But one fatal flaw was the fact that they were only armed with 2 MG-15 machine guns, which gave them no anti-tank capabilities, which meant they were outclassed by the more common T-26 that the Republican forces had in fairly large numbers. A saving grace was the robustness of the Panzer I, and its reliability meant that it could handle the harsh Spanish terrain and keep pace with the infantry very well, and after the Civil War it had earned a good reputation with the nationalist forces. After Spain, 15 Panzer Is were bought by the Chinese. This was a very poor choice though, as due to China's poor infrastructure and military organisation, the tanks arrived in a less than ideal way, with rust and damage on many important parts. And due to the tanks' poor ground clearance and China's very steep terrain, the mobility of these tanks was severely limited. Also, the heat and humidity meant the tanks would overheat very quickly, and the crew would become very uncomfortable, meaning they would struggle to actually use the tank effectively. Even with all these problems, they were used in combat against the Japanese in the defence of Nanking, where all 15 were captured and sent back to Japan for evaluation. The Panzer I also took part in the annexation of Austria and Czechoslovakia, but no fighting occurred in this operation. Then the invasion of Poland began, with 972 Panzer Is being deployed, making up to 40% of all German tanks deployed in this operation. The Panzer I performed well in terms of mobility and reliability, and helped the infantry with assaults on fortified Polish positions. But due to its thin armour, it was very vulnerable to Polish anti-tank weapons, and in total, 320 Panzer Is were knocked out during the invasion. Even with heavy losses, the tank performed fairly well, and much was learned by the German tank crews. Next, the invasion of Denmark and Norway, which involved 29 Panzer Is. This small number of tanks did relatively well, with no tanks lost to combat actions, as both nations fielded no active tanks, and very few anti-tank weapons, but the harsh terrain did cripple several Panzer Is during travel. The next large engagement was the invasion of France and the Benelux territories, where 554 Panzer Is took part in the campaign. The performance was mediocre, as at this point the Panzer II, III and IV had far better armour and armament, and the Panzer Is were there to make up numbers against the more numerical and heavily armed and armoured French and British tanks. But even with the Panzer I being outclassed, it was still able to succeed against its enemies, as Germany had far better communication and combined arms, which was the winning factor in this campaign. But by the end of the campaign, 182 Panzer Is were completely destroyed. The Panzer I after France was seen as obsolete and not useful for frontline combat, but could still be used as a training vehicle and for policing duties, which it did in North Africa and Yugoslavia and Greece, with pretty good results. But even with Germany knowing the Panzer I was now outclassed by the enemy tanks, 337 still took part in Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union, and within the first month 172 had been lost, and with no new Panzer Is being made, the rest were either slowly lost to combat or converted into other supporting vehicle roles, and a very few fighting all the way to the end of World War II. In summary, the Panzer I helped Germany train and learn tank tactics, which was invaluable to their war efforts, and even though the tank was outclassed in almost all of its combat operations, it performed well, and in my opinion was an absolute workhorse for the German army and deserves some well-earned respect by us all. Thank you for watching this, I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you on the next one. Have a fantastic day.